Ethan Carter stood in the rain holding a cardboard box that wasn't his. Outside an apartment that wasn't his, feeling something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Her hand touched his arm. Just for a second, and his whole chest caved in. He didn't understand it yet. He didn't have a word for it. But somewhere deep beneath the routine and the silence and the slow death of everything he used to want, something moved. That night she whispered 4 words he was never supposed to hear. "You should have been mine." And Ethan Carter, the quiet man who thought he'd already lived his best years, realized he had never truly been seen before in his life. If you're watching this from Chicago, Denver, Phoenix, or anywhere across America tonight, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it hits something real in you, subscribe. Because this one, it's only just beginning. Ethan almost didn't answer the phone. It was a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday that had no business being dramatic gray sky, leftover pasta in the fridge. His 8-year-old son, Noah, asleep by 8:30. He was sitting on the couch with the TV on, but not watching it. The volume low enough that he could hear the rain hitting the kitchen window in that steady, indifferent way rain does when it doesn't care what kind of day you've had. His phone buzzed on the cushion beside him. He looked at the screen. Lily Hale. He stared at it for 2 full rings. Lily. Jessica's little sister. He hadn't spoken to her in 18 months, maybe longer. Not since the divorce paperwork was signed, and everyone quietly chose sides, and Ethan just stepped back from the whole map of that family and tried to find somewhere neutral to breathe. He answered on the 4th ring. Lily. Ethan. Her voice was steady but careful, like she'd rehearsed the first word and wasn't sure about the rest. "I'm sorry to call out of nowhere. I know it's weird." "It's not weird," he said, because that was the kind of man he was. The kind who said it's not weird even when it clearly was. "I'm moving this weekend," she said. "Into a new place over in the Pearl District. I tried to hire movers, but they canceled last minute, and it's not a lot of stuff, but I've got some furniture. I can't move alone, and I don't really have anyone local I can ask." Silence, not the uncomfortable kind. Just a pause, where both of them understood what she wasn't saying. "I could call Jessica, but I won't. I could call one of her friends, but they're not mine anymore. And for some reason, you were the first person I thought of." "What time Saturday?" Ethan asked. She exhaled. It was quiet, barely audible, but he heard it. 8, if that's too early." 8 is fine. Text me the address." He spent the next 3 days not thinking about it. That was a lie. He spent the next 3 days thinking about it in that sideways peripheral way men do when something bothers them, and they don't want to admit it's bothering them. He'd be in the middle of a work call, reviewing circuit load specs, something he could do half asleep, and suddenly wonder why she'd called him. Out of everyone, out of the entire city of Portland and everyone in her phone. Why Ethan Carter? He didn't ask himself that question with ego. He asked it the way a man asks any question he genuinely can't answer. The way you look at a broken circuit and go, where exactly did this stop making sense? Saturday morning he dropped Noah off at his mother's place, drove across the bridge in the early gray light, and pulled up outside a building on Northwest 12th just as the rain started again. Lily was standing outside with 2 cups of coffee. She held one out before he even got his door open. "I figured," she said simply. He took it. "You figured right." She looked different was the wrong word. She looked exactly like herself, which was the problem. Because the version of Lily Hale he kept in memory was background detail. Jessica's quieter sister at Thanksgiving, the one reading in the corner, the one who smiled politely and disappeared before dessert. He'd never actually looked at her. She had dark hair she wore pulled back and eyes that were doing this thing, watching him without making a performance of it, like she was taking note of something, like he was a document she'd read before and was now verifying against the original. It should have felt uncomfortable, It didn't. "How much stuff are we talking?" he asked. "2-bedroom loads. One couch that I'm already regretting buying." "Always is," he said. She smiled. Not a big smile. Just the corners of her mouth quiet and real. And they went to work. The thing about moving furniture with someone is that it's honest work. There's no room for performance. You're either useful or you're not. You're either communicating or you're causing problems. And the way two people move through a space together, the way they anticipate each other, make room adjust without being told, says something real about them. Lily Hale did not get in his way. Not once. She'd already labeled the boxes. She knew which ones were heavy and warned him before he grabbed them. When they wrestled the couch through the narrow hallway of her old apartment, she didn't panic and she didn't give useless directions. She just said, "Angle left, wait." "Okay, now pull," and they got it through on the first try. By the second trip, he noticed she worked the way he worked. Quiet, efficient, no wasted motion. "You've moved a lot," he said. It wasn't a question. "4 times in 6 years," she said. "You learn." "Where before this?" "Seattle for 3 years. Austin before that." She set down a box labeled "Kitchen Fragile" and straightened up. "I kept trying to find the right place." "Did you—" She looked at him for half a second longer than the question probably warranted. "Still deciding," she said. They loaded the truck. They drove the 12 blocks to her new building. They unloaded the truck. And somewhere in the 4 hours of all that, somewhere between the second coffee she'd packed in a thermos and the moment they finally got the couch positioned against the wall and both stood back to look at it, Ethan realized he hadn't checked his phone once. He couldn't remember the last time that had happened. "You hungry?" she asked. "I could eat. There's a diner 2 blocks over. Nothing fancy, counter seats, real pie, the waitress calls you honey without irony." "That's exactly my kind of place," he said. The waitress was named Donna, and she absolutely called them both honey. They sat across from each other in a corner booth with vinyl seats and a laminated menu that hadn't changed since 2003. Lily ordered eggs and toast. Ethan ordered the same. The coffee came black and hot, and neither of them complained about it. "Can I ask you something?" Lily said. "Sure." "Why'd you say yes?" He looked at her. "To what?" "To coming today." She held her mug in both hands. "We haven't spoken in almost 2 years. I know that the situation with Jessica and everything I know, it made things complicated. I wasn't sure you'd pick up the phone." Ethan thought about it honestly. That was one of the things divorce had done to him, stripped away his ability to give automatic answers. He'd used up all his automatic answers in the last year of his marriage, and now he had this uncomfortable habit of actually thinking before he spoke. "I don't know," he said. "I think I just didn't feel like saying no." "That's it. That's it." He paused. "Why'd you call me?" She looked down at her coffee for a moment. "Because I knew you'd come," she said. "And I knew you wouldn't make it complicated." "How'd you know that?" Her eyes came back up. "Because you never do." He wasn't sure if that was a compliment or something more complicated than a compliment. The way she said it, not soft, not sharp, just certain, made him feel like she'd watched him from a distance long enough to understand something about him that he hadn't finished understanding about himself. "Jessica used to say I was emotionally unavailable," he said. He wasn't sure why he said it. It just came out. The way things come out when you've been keeping them too long. "I know," Lily said. "She told me." "What do you think?" She was quiet for a moment. That quiet he was already learning wasn't empty. It was deliberate. She thought before she spoke. She didn't fill silence, just to fill it. "I think," she said slowly, "that there's a difference between being unavailable and being unheard. And I think those two things look identical from the outside when the person you're with isn't listening carefully enough to tell them apart." The diner noise kept going around them. Donna refilled someone's coffee at the counter. A man 2 booths over laughed at something. Ethan looked at Lily Hale and felt something shift very slightly inside his chest. Like a gear that had been stuck finally found its next position. He didn't say anything, neither did she. And somehow that was fine. By the time they got back to her apartment to finish arranging things, the rain had stopped and the late afternoon light was coming through the windows in long pale strips. Ethan was helping her level a bookshelf against the far wall when she said out of nowhere, "You take your coffee with 1 sugar in the morning and black in the afternoon." He looked over his shoulder. "What? Your coffee?" She wasn't looking at him, she was checking the shelf level. "You switched after the second cup at the diner. You didn't ask for sugar." He straightened up slowly. When did you? "Thanksgiving," she said. 3 years ago. You made coffee twice. Once in the morning, once after lunch." She finally looked at him. Her expression was neutral. Calm. Like this was just a fact she was delivering, nothing more. "I notice things. I always have." "Lily." "Yeah. That was 3 years ago." "I know." She turned back to the shelf. "Does that bother you?" He thought about the honest answer. He kept coming back to honest answers today. "No," he said. And he meant it. Jump walk. It was almost 7 when he finally gathered his jacket and keys. Lily walked him to the door. The hallway of her new building was narrow, and they stood close without meaning to that proximity that happens in doorways when there's nowhere else to be. "Thank you, Ethan," she said. "Genuinely. This would have been, I don't know what I would have done. You would have figured it out." He meant that too. She struck him as the kind of person who always found a way. He took a step toward the elevator. "Ethan?" He stopped, turned. Lily was leaning against her doorframe, arms crossed loosely, watching him with that same careful, quiet attention she'd had all day. But something was different now. The neutrality was gone. Just barely, just at the edges. Something behind her eyes that had weight to it. Something old. She opened her mouth. She closed it. And then she said quietly, without drama, almost like she was saying it more to herself than to him, "You should have been mine." The words landed without a sound. Ethan didn't move. He wasn't sure he could have moved if he'd wanted to. Lily's eyes stayed on him for one long, suspended second, and then she looked down, something flickering across her face, too fast to name. "Good night," she said softly, and she stepped back inside and closed the door. Ethan sat in his truck for 9 minutes. He knew it was 9 minutes because he stared at the clock and watched it the whole time without starting the engine. "You should have been mine." He replayed it, turned it over, looked at it from every angle, the way he looked at diagrams when something wasn't adding up, checking each line, each connection, asking where the current was actually going versus where it was supposed to go. She hadn't said it like a confession. She hadn't said it like a question. She hadn't said it with tears or anger or desperation. She'd said it like a truth she'd been carrying too long in a pocket that had gotten too heavy. Like she'd just needed to set it down somewhere. He thought about her hands on the coffee cup. The way she'd warned him about the heavy boxes before he grabbed them. The way she'd said, "I think there's a difference between being unavailable and being unheard," with the calm certainty of someone who had thought about it for a very long time. He thought about Thanksgiving, 3 years ago, 1 sugar in the morning, black in the afternoon. He started the engine. He drove home. He picked up Noah from his mother's place. His son climbed into the back seat, still half asleep, clutching a stuffed dinosaur, and said, "How was the moving, Dad?" And Ethan said, "Good, buddy." It was good. Noah was asleep again before they crossed the bridge. Ethan drove through the Portland dark, with the heater on low, and the city lights blurring softly through the wet windshield. And somewhere between the bridge and home, without deciding to, without understanding yet what it meant, he thought, "When was the last time someone remembered how I take my coffee?" He couldn't answer that. He'd been married for 6 years, and he couldn't answer that. And he put Noah to bed, washed the coffee thermos she'd packed, stood at the kitchen sink for a while with the water running, not washing anything. His phone was on the counter. He didn't text her, but he thought about it. and thinking about it, that quiet circling pull he hadn't felt toward anything in longer than he wanted to admit was already more than he knew what to do with. Outside, the rain started again. In the apartment across the Pearl District, Lily Hale sat on her new couch in her barely unpacked apartment and did not regret the words she'd said. She'd carried them long enough. She'd carried them through his courtship with her sister, through his wedding, through the slow public collapse of that marriage, through 18 months of deliberate distance. She'd carried them until tonight when they'd finally become too heavy to hold. She didn't know what he would do with them, but for the first time in years, she'd stopped pretending she hadn't meant them. And that at least was honest. 3 days passed. Ethan didn't text her. He told himself it was because there was nothing appropriate to say. What was the response to you should have been mine, from a woman he'd seen maybe a dozen times in 6 years, who happened to be the sister of the woman who'd told a judge he was emotionally unavailable, conflict avoidant, and incapable of genuine intimacy. What was the follow-up text to that? Hey, thanks again for the coffee. Also, what did you mean exactly? He didn't text her, but he thought about her. Every single day in that sideways peripheral way that was becoming a habit he didn't know how to break. He thought about her while he was reviewing load calculations at his desk. He thought about her while Noah was telling him something about a kid at school who could burp the alphabet, and Ethan was nodding in all the right places, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. He thought about her at 11 p.m. when the apartment was quiet, and there was nothing left to distract him from himself. He thought about one sugar in the morning and black in the afternoon. He thought about the way she said, "I think there's a difference between being unavailable and being unheard," with the quiet certainty of someone who had been paying attention long enough to know the difference. On the 4th day, his phone rang. Not Lily. Jessica. He stared at the screen for a moment, that familiar clench in his chest. Not quite dread, not quite grief, just the particular exhaustion of a conversation he knew the shape of before it started. He answered anyway because he always answered. Because they shared a son. No, because they shared Noah, who was 8 years old, and deserved parents who could at least speak to each other like adults. Ethan! Her voice was clipped, professional, the voice she used when she was controlling something. Jessica. I heard you helped Lily move on Saturday. He kept his voice level. I did. She called you. She did. A pause. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that was doing work on the other end, assembling something, deciding how sharp to make it. Why would she call you? Jessica said. Out of everyone she knows in this city, why would she call my ex-husband? I don't know, Ethan said. You'd have to ask her. I'm asking you. She needed help moving. I helped her move. That's the whole story, Jessica. Another pause. Longer this time. Ethan. Her voice shifted, not softer, but more deliberate. Lily she's complicated. She's always had this thing where she stopped. Started again. Just be careful, that's all I'm saying. Careful of what exactly? Of her getting attached to things that aren't hers. He felt something harden in his chest. Not anger, something quieter and colder than anger. I'm going to stop you there, he said. Lily asked me to help her move furniture. I moved furniture. That's it. Is it? Goodbye, Jessica. He hung up. He sat at his kitchen table for a long moment afterward, his hand still resting on the phone, listening to the particular silence of a conversation that had left something behind. Jessica had always done that, left residue. You'd hang up and still feel her in the room, still feel the shape of what she'd implied without saying, still feel vaguely guilty for something you hadn't done. He picked up his phone. He opened a new text. He typed, "How's the apartment settling?" He stared at it for 30 seconds. He sent it. Lily's response came 4 minutes later. The couch is in the wrong place. I keep staring at it. He almost smiled. Want help moving it? If I say yes, will you actually come? He looked at that for a moment. The directness of it. The complete absence of pretense. Saturday morning, he typed. Same time. Her reply was just 1 sugar. And that was it. That was all. But when he set his phone down, the apartment felt slightly different than it had 5 minutes ago. Lighter by some specific and unquantifiable amount, the way a room feels when someone opens a window you forgot was there. He didn't examine it. He just let it be. Saturday came the way October. Saturdays in Portland come cold and clean, the kind of air that makes you feel more awake than you want to be at 8 in the morning. He dropped Noah at his mother's again, drove across the bridge again, and found himself standing at her door again, with none of the uncertainty he'd expected to feel. She opened the door in jeans and a gray sweatshirt, barefoot, holding a mug in both hands. "You actually came," she said. "I said I would." "People say things. I don't," he said simply. She looked at him for a moment, that steady, measuring look he was starting to recognize as just how she looked at the world. Like she was always quietly checking whether what she saw matched what she expected. Like she'd been disappointed enough times that she'd learned to verify. "Come in," she said. The apartment looked different than it had the week before, lived in slightly. A plant on the windowsill. Books on the shelf actually arranged. The couch in question was pushed against the wrong wall, which he could see immediately. It was blocking the natural flow of the room, turning its back on the window light. "It needs to rotate 90 degrees, he said. "I know." She sounded mildly frustrated with herself. "I could see it the moment I woke up Monday morning. I just couldn't get the angle." "Take that end," he said. They moved it in under 4 minutes, slid it, rotated, it settled it in the new position. She stood back and looked at it. Something in her posture shifted, released. "There," she said quietly. "There it is." "There it is," he agreed. She turned to him. "You want breakfast? I have eggs. I also have slightly stale sourdough that I think is still acceptable." Slightly stale sourdough sounds perfect. And so they ended up in her kitchen, which was still only half unpacked, with him sitting on the counter, because there was only one stool, and he gestured for her to take it, and her standing at the stove, scrambling eggs with the ease of someone who cooked for themselves and didn't make a production of it. "She called you," Lily said. It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't pretend not to know who she meant. "Wednesday." "What did she say?" "That I should be careful. That you get attached to things that aren't yours." He watched Lily's back, watched her shoulders. She didn't tense. She didn't react the way someone reacts when they've been caught. She reacted the way someone reacts when they hear something they've heard, before a slow, quiet exhale, like setting down something heavy she'd been carrying for years. "She's been saying that about me since I was 17, Lily said. "What do you mean?" "What?" She turned the heat down on the eggs. She was quiet for a moment, but not evasive, thinking the way she always seemed to think, like she was choosing the exact word and not the approximate one. "When I was in high school," she said, "I had a thing for a boy named Marcus. He was kind and funny, and he made me feel like I wasn't invisible. Jessica told me I was pathetic for liking someone so out of my league. I was 16. He was her friend, technically, and after she said that every time I had feelings for anyone, any time I got close to someone, she'd find a way to frame it as me reaching for something that wasn't mine." She paused. "I think she needed me to be reaching. It made her feel like she had something I wanted." The kitchen was quiet except for the eggs. "Did you?" Ethan asked carefully. She looked over her shoulder at him. Her expression was completely open. No deflection, no performance. "Not always," she said. "But sometimes." She turned back to the stove. "Honest enough for you?" He thought about that. He thought about his marriage, about the 6 years of conversations that had circled around the truth without ever landing on it. He thought about therapy sessions, where he'd sat across from a woman with a clipboard and tried to explain why he felt alone inside his own house, and the therapist had asked, "Have you told your wife that?" And the answer, the real answer he'd never said out loud, was that he'd tried and she hadn't heard it, and eventually he'd stopped trying. "More honest than I've been in years," he said. Lily plated the eggs. She handed him his and sat on the stool across from where he'd settled on the counter, and they ate breakfast in that easy silence that Ethan was starting to understand was not the absence of something, but the presence of something he'd been missing. Halfway through the egg, she said, "Can I ask you something real?" "You can ask me anything." "Do you miss her, Jessica? Not the marriage, her. Do you miss who she was to you?" He put down his fork. He thought about it with the seriousness the question deserved. "No," he said finally. "I miss who I thought she was. I miss the idea of a person that turned out not to be exactly accurate." He paused. "I think I grieve the years more than I grieve her. Does that make me a bad person?" "No," Lily said quietly. "It makes you someone who's being honest about something painful. That's the opposite of bad." "She thought I was emotionally unavailable." "I know." "Do you think that—" Lily looked at him steadily. "You're here, aren't you? You picked up the phone. You showed up twice now. You're sitting in my kitchen eating eggs and answering real questions with real answers. That doesn't look emotionally unavailable to me. That looks like a man who needed someone to actually ask." Something moved in his chest again. That same gear catching. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. She already understood that. They spent the morning unpacking boxes. Not because she asked, and not because he offered, it just became the natural thing to do next. He'd hand her something, she'd decide where it belonged. He'd ask, "Does this go with these?" and she'd say, "No, that cabinet." And he'd put it in the right cabinet. Simple, efficient, honest. Around 11, he found a box labeled, "Emisk Don't Open Yet," pushed into the back of the bedroom closet. He didn't open it. But he noticed it the way you notice a thing that's been deliberately set aside. She noticed him notice it. "Not yet," she said simply. "Okay," he said. And he left it alone. Around noon his phone buzzed. Not Jessica this time. His mother asking if he wanted her to keep Noah through dinner so Ethan could have an evening. He replied yes without thinking, then looked up to find Lily watching him from the doorway with that half smile that was becoming something he looked forward to. "Good news?" she asked. "Free evening," he said. "My mother has Noah." She tilted her head slightly. "You want to stay for lunch too?" He looked at her. He thought about Jessica's warning about the way she'd said be careful, like it was a threat disguised as advice. He thought about the box in the closet and the things he didn't know yet. He thought about 4 words whispered in a hallway that he hadn't been able to put down for a week. "Yeah," he said. "I want to stay." The afternoon moved slowly and felt nothing like slow. They talked the way people talk when they've stopped performing, not in stories designed to impress, but in observations, fragments, half-finished thoughts that the other person completed without prompting. She told him about Seattle, about the job she'd left there because the work was good, but the life around it was hollow. He told her about the year after the divorce, when he'd been so determined to seem fine that he'd forgotten to figure out if he actually was. She laughed, not a polite laugh, a real one, slightly surprised when he told her about the time he'd signed Noah up for a soccer league that turned out to be for children 3 years younger, and spent an entire season pretending that was intentional. "You coached a team of 5-year-olds on purpose," she said. "They needed someone," he said, and she laughed again. He realized around 3 in the afternoon that he hadn't felt this, whatever this was, in longer than he could pinpoint. Not happy exactly. Something quieter than happy. Something that felt like being in a room where the temperature was exactly right and no one was asking you to adjust it. He was in the middle of a sentence, something about Noah's inexplicable obsession with deep-sea fish, when her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Something happened to her face. A small thing. A tightening. Like a door closing somewhere behind her eyes. "It's Jessica," she said. Ethan went quiet. Lily looked at the phone. The phone rang again. She answered it, and she didn't leave the room, and he didn't pretend he couldn't hear. "Hey," Lily said. He heard Jessica's voice, tinny and too fast, even from across the room. He couldn't make out the words, but he knew the rhythm. He'd lived inside that rhythm for 6 years. That forward-leaning urgency, that particular pitch she got when she was about to reframe something. "I know," Lily said. "Yes, he's here." A pause. More of Jessica's voice. "We're unpacking boxes, Jessica." Lily's voice stayed steady. Completely steady, like a flat horizon. That's all? More. Faster now. I understand that you have feelings about this, Lily said, but I need you to understand that I am not asking for your permission. She paused. And I need you to not call me again today. She hung up. She set the phone face down on the counter. She didn't look at Ethan right away. She looked at the counter for a moment, jaw slightly set, chest rising with one careful breath. Then she looked at him. She's on her way here, Lily said. Ethan felt it the shift. The way the air in the room changed when a storm was coming that you'd been pretending not to see. How long? He asked. 20 minutes, maybe less. She paused. You can go if you want. I wouldn't blame you. He looked at her. He thought about every time in his marriage he'd chosen to leave rather than stay. Every time the conflict had risen and he'd retreated into his own internal wiring, gone quiet, gone distant, left the room in every way that mattered. He thought about what she'd said this morning. That doesn't look emotionally unavailable to me. That looks like a man who needed someone to actually ask. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Lily held his gaze for a moment. Something moved in her expression. Not relief exactly. Something older than relief. Like a word she'd needed to hear for a very long time had just arrived finally and sat down in the place it was always supposed to occupy. Okay, she said quietly. 17 minutes later, the knock came. Jessica didn't wait for the door to open fully before she came in, and Ethan watched her cross the room and saw the exact moment she registered him. That pause, that recalibration, that split second where the script she'd written in the car didn't match the room she'd walked into. He was not sitting in a corner. He was not looking guilty. He was standing in Lily's kitchen with his coffee mug and his feet planted and his eyes steady. Ethan! Jessica's voice held something he recognized. Not quite surprise. The tone of someone who had expected to walk into a controllable situation and found something sturdier than they planned for. Jessica, he said. She looked between them. Her eyes moved fast, cataloging, assessing, building a story out of what she saw. He knew that look. He'd spent 6 years being cataloged by that look. What exactly is going on here? She said. Nothing that concerns you, Lily said from across the room. Her voice was still that flat horizon, unmovable. You didn't need to come. You're spending time with my ex-husband Lily, in your apartment, alone. He's a person, Lily said. Not your property. The ex part of ex-husband is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Jessica turned to Ethan. She had that look on her face, the one he'd once mistaken for vulnerability, and had eventually recognized as a very specific kind of pressure. The look that said, tell her. Back me up. Explain to her that this is wrong. Ethan, she said softer now, you have to see how this looks. I see how it looks to you, he said. That's different from how it is. And how is it? He thought about the last 6 hours, the couch moving into the right position, eggs on the stove, a conversation about Seattle and Hollow Lives, and the year he'd been so determined to seem fine that he'd forgotten to check. The laugh she'd given him over the soccer league. The warmth of doing nothing in particular with someone who made nothing in particular feel like exactly enough. It looks like 2 adults having a day, he said. That's all. Jessica's jaw tightened. She pivoted back to Lily, and now the softness was gone, and what came out instead was the thing underneath it, sharp and old and territorial. You've always done this, Jessica said. You've always wanted what I have, since we were kids, since Marcus, since you think I don't know why you called him specifically out of everyone in this city you called him. Lily was very still. You want to talk about Marcus? She said quietly. Okay, let's talk about Marcus. You told me I was pathetic. I was 16. You spent 20 years convincing me that anything I wanted that came near your orbit was me being greedy. She paused. And then I watched you marry the kindest, most patient man I had ever met. And I watched you spend 6 years making him feel like he was never enough. And I kept my mouth shut, Jessica. I kept my mouth shut for 6 years because it wasn't my place. And now it is, Jessica said, her voice tightening. Now, Lily said, he's not yours anymore. So no, it is not the same thing as Marcus. Not even close. The room went quiet in that profound way rooms go quiet when something real has been said. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be filled. Ethan watched Jessica's face. He watched the emotions move through it. Anger, then something that might have been embarrassment, then the thing underneath both of those, the thing he'd finally learned to name after the divorce fear. Not of losing him. She didn't want him back. He understood that. The fear of losing the narrative. The fear that the version of events she'd constructed, where she was the reasonable one, the wronged one, the one who'd tried her best with a difficult and unavailable man, was no longer the only version in the room. You don't know what you're getting into, Jessica said to Lily. Her voice was quieter now, controlled but strained at the edges. You think you do. You've been watching from the outside, and you think you understand, but you don't. You're right that I've been watching from outside, Lily said. What I saw was someone who had more patience and more decency than you knew what to do with. What I saw was someone who tried. She paused. And what I saw was him stop trying. Not because he gave up. Because he ran out of places to land. The words sat in the room. Ethan felt something move in his chest that was not a gear catching this time. It was something larger. Something that had been positioned incorrectly for so long that its natural shape had started to feel foreign, and now being named out loud by someone who had been watching carefully enough to see it, he felt it begin slowly to realign. Jessica looked at him. He didn't look away. Are you seriously? She stopped, started again. Ethan? Are you telling me you're what? You're interested in my sister? He took a breath. He thought about easy answers. He thought about the version of himself who would have shrugged and deflected and said, "It's not like that," to avoid the confrontation. He thought about that man who had spent 6 years going quiet when he should have spoken, and spoken only when there was nothing left to say. I'm telling you, he said, that I spent a Saturday helping someone move furniture, and it was the most comfortable I've felt in 3 years. I don't know what that means yet, but I know it doesn't require your approval. Jessica stared at him. Something crossed her face that he hadn't seen before, or maybe he had once very early before they'd both started performing for each other. Something that looked almost like recognition, like she was seeing something true and knew she couldn't argue with it even if she wanted to. She looked at Lily. She looked at him. She picked up her bag from the counter where she'd set it. Fine, she said. The single word had the texture of a door closing, not slamming closing, quietly, with full knowledge of what it meant. She left. The door shut behind her. Ethan and Lily stood in the silence she'd left behind, and neither of them moved for a moment. The apartment held all of it. The confrontation, the words that couldn't be taken back, the shape of everything that had just been said out loud for the first time. Then Lily exhaled one long, slow breath, and she walked to the counter and picked up her mug with both hands and held it without drinking from it. She's not wrong that you don't know what you're getting into, she said quietly. Tell me then, Ethan said. She looked up. Tell me what I'm getting into, he said. Not the version Jessica would tell me, yours. Lily held his gaze for a long moment. That measuring look. Checking whether what she saw matched what she expected. Deciding whether to trust what she found. Then she said, I kept something, for a long time. Something I never showed anyone. She paused. It's in that box, the one in the closet. Ethan was very still. The don't open yet box, he said. Yeah. Her voice was quiet. I've been carrying it for 4 years. I almost threw it away twice. I didn't. The room felt suspended. Like the moment before a circuit closes, like potential energy that hasn't decided yet what it's going to become. When you're ready, he said. I don't know when I'm ready, she said honestly. Then we don't open it until you do, he said. That's okay. She looked at him across the kitchen. This woman he'd barely known 2 weeks ago. This woman who remembered how he took his coffee 3 years before he knew she'd noticed, this woman who had stood completely still while his ex-wife accused her and had not flinched, had not performed, had not tried to manage anyone's feelings except her own. She said, "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know." A pause. "Less?" He held her gaze. Outside, the afternoon had gone gray and still. Inside, the apartment felt like something that had not yet been named, but already had weight. "I should go get Noah," he said at last. "I know." He grabbed his jacket from the chair where he'd left it. He walked to the door. He stopped, one hand on the frame, and looked back at her. She was still holding the mug with both hands, still standing at the counter, still watching him with that steady, unhurried attention that had started to feel like the most honest thing in his life. "Coffee," he said. "Real coffee. Not moving furniture. Just coffee. Next week." "Yes," she said, without hesitation, without performance. He nodded once. He left, and in the elevator on the way down, he stood and looked at the closed doors and felt for the first time in longer than he could clearly remember that he was moving toward something instead of just staying still. The box in the closet had been there for 4 years. He didn't know what was in it. But he knew with the certainty of a man who has spent his whole life reading systems and understanding what connects to what, that whatever it was, it had his name on it, and whatever it meant, it was going to change everything. The coffee happened on a Wednesday, not the weekend Wednesday. Ethan had texted on Monday asking if she was free midweek, and she'd said yes before he finished typing the question, and he'd noticed that and decided not to read into it, which meant he read into it constantly for the next 48 hours. He picked the place. A small coffee shop on Northwest 23rd that he'd been going to for 2 years, counter seats along the window. Good light, the kind of place where the staff knew his order but didn't make a thing of it. He got there 7 minutes early and sat with his hands around a mug and told himself to stop acting like a man who didn't know how to do this. He knew how to do this. He'd been married. He'd dated before that. He was 34 years old, and he was sitting in a coffee shop waiting for a woman, and his left knee was bouncing under the table like he was 17 again. Lily walked in exactly on time. Not early. Not late, exactly on time, which he was starting to understand was just how she operated. She saw him immediately cross the room without looking around for him, sat down across from him and said, "You look nervous." "I'm not nervous," he said. "Your knee was going," she said. He put his hand on his knee. "I was tapping along to the music." "There's no music playing." He looked at her. She was already almost smiling. "I'm slightly nervous," he admitted. "Good," she said. "Me too." And just like that, the air in the room reset. That was the thing about her. She had a way of making honesty feel like relief instead of exposure. Like the most dangerous thing in the room was pretending. And as soon as you stopped, everything got easier. The coffee came. She took hers, black, no sugar, just black, and he felt something shift in him. A small, private thing, because that wasn't what he'd expected, and he realized he'd been anticipating finding out something new about her, and here it was, the first thing, and it felt like a gift. "You take it black," he said. "Always have." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "Why did you think I'd have a complicated order?" "I didn't think anything. I just didn't know." "Now you do," she said simply. They talked for 2 hours, and it felt like 20 minutes. She told him about her job. She was a technical writer for a healthcare software company. Remote work, had been doing it for 3 years. She was precise and good at it, she said. And she liked that precision, liked making complicated things clear. He told her he felt the same way about electrical systems. There was something satisfying about a problem that had an answer, about a diagram that told the truth. "I think that's why I was bad at marriage," he said, not planning to say it. "Relationships don't have diagrams." "No," she agreed. "They don't." "Does that bother you?" She thought about it. "It used to. I used to want everything to be legible. I wanted people to mean what they said and say what they meant, and I kept being surprised when they didn't." She paused. I think I stopped being surprised and started just watching more carefully. Is that why you remember things? He asked. The coffee, the Thanksgiving things, the details. She looked at him over her mug. When you care about someone, you pay attention to them. It's not complicated. Most people don't. I know, she said quietly. That's the part that always surprised me. He thought about that for the rest of the afternoon. He thought about it driving home, picking up Noah, helping with math homework that was well below his engineering capacity, but somehow still occasionally stumped him because Noah always found the single-edge case that Ethan hadn't anticipated. He thought about it making dinner, and he thought about it lying in bed at 11 p.m. listening to the rain, which in Portland was just a thing that happened. When you care about someone, you pay attention to them. He thought about 6 years of marriage and tried to remember the last time Jessica had noticed something small about him. Not the big things, the anniversaries, the gestures, the performances of caring. The small things. The one sugar in the morning. The way he always read the last page of a book before the first one. The way he went quiet when he was thinking hard about something, and it wasn't distance, it was concentration. The way he stopped. He stopped because the list of small things was empty. And he didn't know lying in the dark whether that was her fault or his, or just the slow erosion of two people who had never been quite the right shape for each other. He texted Lily. Thank you for today. She replied 40 seconds later. Thank you for asking. Then a moment later. Same time next week, he typed back, every week. He set his phone down. He looked at the ceiling for a while. Outside rain. And somewhere across the city, in an apartment that was slowly becoming a home, Lily Hale held her phone and read those two words every week and felt something she had spent years learning not to let herself feel, because every time she had felt it before, something had taken it away. She let herself feel it anyway. That was the second week of October. By the third week of October, they had established something that neither of them had named. Coffee on Wednesday. Occasional texts throughout the week, not constant, not performative, just the natural rhythm of two people who had found a frequency that matched. He'd send her something that reminded him of a conversation they'd had. She'd send him an article she thought he'd find interesting. Usually she was right. Once, she sent him a photograph of a bookshelf display in a store window that had been arranged in a way that was geometrically precise, and she said, "This made me think of you." And he'd stared at that for a long time, because no one had ever sent him something that made them think of him in quite that way. Not the obvious things, the specific thing. Noah asked about her on the third Wednesday before Ethan left. Where are you going, Dad? Coffee with a friend. Which friend? Her name is Lily. Noah processed this with the particular seriousness of 8-year-olds confronting new information. Is she a girlfriend? She's a friend, Ethan said carefully. Noah tilted his head. But do you like her? I like her very much. Then she's a girlfriend, Noah said, with the clean, logical certainty of someone who had not yet learned how complicated the space between those two things could be. Ethan did not correct him. He went to coffee. He told Lily what Noah had said when he sat down, because it was the kind of thing he would have once kept private, but was now starting to share, because she was the person he wanted to tell things to, which was itself a kind of answer to his son's question. Lily listened, and then she smiled. Not the small, contained smile she usually had, but a real one, wide and sudden and unguarded, and Ethan felt it like a change in pressure. Smart kid, she said. He's terrifyingly smart, Ethan agreed. It's a lot. He sounds like you. He's better than me. She looked at him. I doubt that, she said quietly. The coffee shop was warm, and the rain was on the windows, and Ethan Carter sat across from Lily Hale and thought I could do this. Every week, every Wednesday, this exact thing for a very long time. I could do this. He didn't say it. But she was watching him carefully, the way she always watched him, and he was pretty sure she knew. The last Wednesday of October, she wasn't at the coffee shop when he arrived. He sat down, ordered, waited. 10 minutes passed. He checked his phone, nothing. He sent a text. Here whenever you're ready, no rush. Waited. 15 minutes. He felt the old familiar feeling, that particular anxiety that lives in the body of someone who has been left in rooms before, that clench in the chest, that isn't quite panic, but isn't nothing. His phone buzzed. "I'm outside. Can you come out?" He found her on the sidewalk in her coat hands in her pockets. She had a bag over her shoulder, not her usual one. And she looked different, not distressed exactly, braced, like someone who had made a decision they weren't going to reverse, but weren't entirely sure how to begin executing it. "What's wrong?" he said. "Nothing's wrong." She took a breath. "I have the box." Ethan went still. "It's in the bag," she said. "I've been carrying it around for 2 weeks, deciding whether to. I keep almost doing it, and then not." She looked at him directly. "I want to show you, but I don't want to do it in there." She nodded toward the coffee shop window. "Too many people." "Okay," he said. "We can walk, or we can go to your place." "My place," she said. They walked the 6 blocks to her apartment without talking much. The silence was not uncomfortable, but it had weight. He could feel her thinking beside him, that particular quality of thought she had that had physical presence, that made the air around her feel slightly denser when she was working through something important. Inside, she set the bag on the table. She took off her coat. She stood in front of the bag for a moment with her hands at her sides, and Ethan sat in the chair across from the table and waited. Because that was what she needed, someone who would wait without filling the silence, without prompting, without making her feel like she was taking too long. She reached into the bag and took out the box. It was smaller than he'd expected. A shoebox, essentially, with the lid taped shut. Plain. No label. She set it on the table. She sat down across from him. She said, "I started keeping this the year before you and Jessica got engaged." She said it, looking at the box, not at him. "I want you to understand, I never tried to interfere. I never said anything to her, never said anything to you. I didn't have anywhere to put what I was feeling, so I put it in here." Ethan was very still. "Lily," he said. "Let me finish," she said gently. "Or I won't." She took a breath. "You came to a family dinner in February. I don't know if you remember it. It was at my parents' house. It was cold. You came early and helped my dad move a table because the leaf had stuck and no one could get it out. You didn't make a thing of it. You just fixed it and went and sat down and started talking to my grandmother about her garden." She paused. "No one did that. No one in Jessica's life before you ever talked to my grandmother about anything. She was 81 and nobody talked to her." She looked up then finally, and her eyes were steady and dry, but there was something behind them that had lived a long time and cost something to carry. "I went home that night, and I wrote down exactly what you'd done. Not because I was obsessed, because I didn't want to forget it. Because I had never seen anyone be kind in exactly that way before, and I wanted to keep it somewhere." The room was very quiet. "That was in the box," she said. Ethan didn't speak. "There are other things," she said. "A movie ticket stub from a film I saw the week you and Jessica announced your engagement. I went alone because I needed somewhere to be that wasn't around people who were celebrating. A letter I wrote you and never sent 6 months before your wedding. I wrote it to..." She stopped. "I wrote it to put it somewhere. I never mailed it. I never intended to. I just needed somewhere to put it." She touched the edge of the box with one finger. "A photograph from your wedding. I'm in the background. I looked happy. I was performing." Her voice didn't break. It stayed level, but there was a quality to the levelness, now the quality of something that has been held still for a very long time by sheer sustained effort. "The day you and Jessica filed for divorce, I bought a plant. That plant is in my window right now. I bought it because I needed something alive in my apartment, something that just needed water and light, and not the specific complicated thing that people need. I didn't know why I bought it that day specifically for a long time. And then I did." She stopped. She looked at him. Ethan's chest felt like a room someone had just walked into for the first time in years, dusty and too full, and somehow also bare. He thought about the plant on her windowsill. He'd noticed it the first day, had thought it was just a plant, which it was, but now it was also this. Now it was also 4 years of something that had nowhere to go, but had kept going anyway. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked quietly. "Because you asked me what you were getting into," she said. "And I told you I'd tell you, and this is it. This is what you're getting into." She put her hand flat on the top of the box. "A woman who spent 4 years caring about you from a distance that was appropriate and correct and cost her something every single day. Who never did anything about it because you belonged to her sister, and that was a line she was never going to cross." She met his eyes. "And who is telling you this now? Not because she wants you to feel sorry for her, or feel obligated to her, or feel anything specific at all, but because you are the first person in my life who has made me feel like the truth is safe to say out loud." Ethan looked at her for a long time. He looked at the box. He thought about the letter inside it addressed to him, never sent, written 6 months before his wedding. He thought about that and felt something enormous move inside him. Not romantic exactly, something more fundamental than that. The recognition of being known. The recognition of having been seen clearly, quietly, without agenda, by someone who never asked for anything in return. "Can I read the letter?" he asked. Lily's breath caught, just barely, just for a second, but he heard it. "You want to read it," she said. "Only if you're okay with that." She looked at the box. She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and she peeled the tape back from the lid, and she opened it. He watched her hands move through the contents with the careful, practiced ease of someone who had handled these objects many times in private. The ticket stub, the photograph folded papers, small things he couldn't identify. She found the letter. An envelope hand-addressed. His name in her handwriting. Neat, precise, the way everything about her was. She held it for a moment without giving it to him. "I wrote this in one sitting," she said. "I didn't edit it. Whatever's in there is exactly what I was thinking at 28, 6 months before you married my sister." She looked up. "Whatever you feel after reading it, that's okay. You don't have to manage my feelings about it. Just..." She paused. "Just be honest with me. After." "Always," he said. She handed him the envelope. He opened it carefully. Unfolded the pages, 2 of them front and back, her handwriting slightly less controlled than it was. Now the handwriting of someone writing quickly, because the feeling was moving faster than the pen. He read. He read it slowly. He read every word. He was aware of her across the table, not watching him. She'd turned slightly, giving him privacy, looking at the window. Giving him room to receive this in whatever way he needed to receive it. The letter was not dramatic. That was the first thing. It was not a declaration of grand passion. It was not desperate or pleading or romantic in the conventional sense. It was a 28-year-old woman writing to a man she had spent a year watching love her sister, telling him not as accusation, not as desire, just as fact, that she had understood something about him that she didn't think the people in his life understood. That she had watched him be patient, when patience cost him. That she had watched him choose kindness in moments when no one would have noticed if he hadn't. That she had watched him make her grandmother feel seen. That she had seen the way he looked sometimes in quiet moments when he thought no one was watching, that particular look of a man searching for something he couldn't name inside a life that almost fit. She had written, "I don't know if you'll ever find what you're looking for. I hope you do. I hope she's the one who gives it to you. But if she isn't, if someday you look up and realize the shape of what you needed was never quite the shape of what you had, I hope you know that someone was paying attention. Someone saw you. Not the version of you that was performing or managing or holding everything steady. The real version. The quiet one. I saw him, and he was worth seeing." Ethan set the letter down. He sat with it for a moment. He didn't trust himself to speak immediately, so he didn't. He sat with it the way he sat with complex diagrams, reading all the lines, tracing all the connections. understanding where the current was actually going. "Lily," he said finally. She turned back to him. Her face was still composed, but the effort it was taking had become visible in the smallest way, a slight tension in her jaw, her hands folded on the table and holding each other. "You wrote this 6 months before my wedding," he said. "Yes." "And you kept it for 4 years." "Yes." "And you never said anything, not a word, not a hint." "No." He looked at her. "Why not?" She held his gaze. "Because she was my sister, and you chose her, and those two things together made it the clearest. No, I have ever had to give myself." She paused. "And because I wasn't sure I wasn't wrong about you. I was 28. I had watched you from a distance at family dinners and holidays. Maybe what I saw wasn't real. Maybe I was projecting. Maybe I was just lonely and looking for something to hold on to." Her voice stayed even. "I needed to not know. It was safer." "And now?" he asked. "Now I know," she said. "I've spent 2 months with you. I've had real conversations. I've seen how you are with Noah. I've seen how you are with me. I've seen how you handled Jessica in this apartment." She met his eyes directly. "I wasn't wrong. I was 28, and I didn't know everything but about you, about what kind of man you were. I wasn't wrong." Ethan looked at her for a long time. Then he did something he hadn't planned. He reached across the table, and he put his hand over hers. Not a romantic gesture, not a promise. Just contact. Just his hand on hers, warm and still, saying, "I'm here. I received this. I'm not going anywhere." Lily looked down at his hand. She turned hers over slowly, until their palms were touching. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. They sat like that for a long moment in the apartment that was becoming a home, with the box open on the table between them, and the plant on the windowsill, and the letter lying there with its 4 years of careful silence finally out in the light. Then his phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He glanced down reflex and saw the name, and felt the blood in his chest drop about 3 degrees. It wasn't Jessica. It was a name he hadn't seen in 8 months. A name attached to a number he'd thought he had moved past the significance of. His attorney. He picked it up, read the message. Lily watched his face change. "What is it?" she asked. He looked up. He thought about not telling her. He thought about managing this quietly the old way, keeping it to himself, keeping it in the internal compartment where he'd kept everything he didn't know how to share for 6 years. He thought about all that and rejected it with a speed that surprised him. "Jessica's filing for modified custody," he said. "She's citing—" He read the message again, his jaw set. "She's citing concerns about Noah's home environment. Specifically—" He stopped. Lily went very still. "Specifically what?" He looked at her. "Specifically my relationship with a member of her immediate family." The room felt suddenly different. The warmth of the last hour, the letter that held, hands the specific tenderness of something new and real shifted. Didn't disappear, but shifted the way weather shifts. The way the light changes before a storm that you didn't see coming, even though looking back, the signs were all there. Lily's face did something complicated and rapid. He watched it, the sequence of it. The anger that came first and fast, then the guilt that chased it, then the fierce rejection of the guilt, and then underneath all of it, something that looked like fear. "Ethan," she said. "I know," he said. "She's using us against Noah," she said. Her voice was controlled, but barely. "She doesn't want custody. She wants leverage. She's doing this to—" "I know," he said again, quietly. "Tell me what you need," she said. "Whatever you need. If you need space, if you need to step back from Lily." His voice was firm, not harsh, firm the way it was when he was certain. "Stop." She stopped. "I need a good attorney," he said. "I need to call my mother. I need to pick up Noah tonight and hug my kid." He looked at her directly. "What I do not need is to step back from something real because Jessica has decided that my life is still hers to manage." Lily looked at him for a long moment. He could see it, the calculation, The fear, the old habit of making herself smaller to avoid costing anyone something. The 28-year-old who had folded a letter and taped a box shut and decided that what she wanted didn't get to matter because the lines were too complicated. "I'm not a line item in her argument," Lily said. Her voice was quiet and precise. "I'm not going to let her make me into one." "No," Ethan said. "You're not." He picked up his phone. He called his attorney's cell. He stood up and moved to the window while it rang, one hand in his pocket, jaw set, not with panic, with focus. The particular focus of a man who has been passive long enough that when he finally stops being passive, he stops completely. The attorney answered. Ethan talked for 12 minutes. He was calm. He was clear. He asked the right questions and listened to the answers and asked 2 follow-up questions and said, "Send me everything tonight. I'll review it by morning." He hung up. He turned around. Lily was standing in the middle of the room, arms crossed, watching him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before. Something that was not the careful, measuring steadiness she usually wore. Something more open. Something that looked, if he was reading it right, and he thought he was like the expression of a person watching someone they care about do exactly what they needed to do at exactly the moment they needed to do it. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay," he agreed. He picked up his jacket. He picked up the letter from the table and folded it carefully and held it out to her. She shook her head. "Keep it." He looked at her. "You should have it," she said. "I wrote it for you. It was always yours." He folded it. He put it in his jacket pocket inside close to his chest. It fit there like it had always had a place waiting for it. He walked to the door. He stopped. He turned back, and he did something he didn't plan. Something that came from the part of him that had been looking for somewhere to land for 3 years. He walked back across the room, and he put one hand against her face, his thumb at her cheekbone, and he looked at her for one long, full, honest second, and he said, "I see you too." Her breath came out in one quiet exhale. Not a cry. Not a collapse. Just release. The specific release of someone who has been holding something for so long that when it finally gently lifts, the body barely knows what to do with the absence of the weight. He left. The door closed. Lily stood in the middle of her apartment, with her hand pressed to her cheek where his had been, and she looked at the open box on the table, and the plant on the windowsill, and the place where he'd sat, and she felt for the first time in 4 years, like the thing she'd been carrying had not been wasted. It had just been waiting. Outside, Ethan Carter walked to his truck in the rain, one hand in his jacket pocket, the letter pressed against his ribs like a compass that had finally found its north. Somewhere across the city, Jessica Hale was sitting in her lawyer's office, building a case. She had no idea what she had just made him decide to become. The custody filing landed on a Thursday morning, and by Friday, Ethan had read it 4 times. Not because he didn't understand it the first time. He understood it perfectly. That was the problem. He was an engineer. He understood systems. He understood how things were constructed to produce specific outcomes. And what Jessica had built was not a custody case. It was a pressure campaign dressed in legal language, and every paragraph of it was designed to do one thing: make Ethan choose between Noah and Lily before he'd had enough time to understand what either choice actually meant. The filing cited specifically his quote-unquote relationship with a family member known to have a history of emotional instability and boundary violations. It cited concern for Noah's emotional well-being, given exposure to inappropriate adult relationships during a formative developmental period. It cited 3 instances, 3 counted and documented, where Noah had been in Ethan's care while Ethan was, according to Jessica's account, spending significant time with her sister. 3 instances. The move, the couch, the coffee shop Wednesday, where he'd brought Noah along because his mother had a doctor's appointment, and Noah had sat beside him for 40 minutes, drinking hot chocolate and talking to Lily about deep-sea fish, with the enthusiasm of a child who had found someone willing to take his obsessions seriously. Jessica had been watching. Or someone had been watching. Or she'd heard it from somewhere he didn't know which, and it didn't matter. What mattered was that she had cataloged it. What mattered was that she had taken the most ordinary and decent afternoon of his son's recent life and written it into a legal document as evidence of harm. He called his attorney at 7 in the morning. His attorney, a compact, no-nonsense woman named Diane, who had handled his original divorce proceedings and never once told him what she thought he should feel about anything, only what she thought he should do, listened to him for 6 minutes without interrupting. "She has nothing," Diane said. "She has documentation. She has a narrative. There's a difference." A pause. "The question is what judge she draws and how much patience they have for this kind of filing. Some judges read it and dismiss it in 20 minutes. Some judges like to demonstrate thoroughness." Another pause. "We respond fast, and we respond clean. I want a statement from you about the nature of your relationship with the sister. I want character references, and I want Noah's teacher, his pediatrician, and whoever runs his soccer league to be available to speak to his well-being." "His current soccer league, or the one with the 5-year-olds?" Ethan said. Diane didn't even pause. "The current one. I'll have everything to you by Monday," he said. "By Sunday," she said. "We file Monday morning." He hung up. He sat at the kitchen table with his coffee, 1 sugar, though he barely tasted it, and thought about how to explain to his 8-year-old son that the adults in his life were about to make things complicated in ways that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with him at the same time. Noah came downstairs in his pajamas, hair going in every direction, carrying the stuffed dinosaur he'd had since he was 3 and only brought out when he was tired enough to stop being self-conscious about it. "You're up early," Noah said. "Couldn't sleep." Noah climbed onto the chair across from him and looked at him with those clear, direct eyes that had always unsettled Ethan slightly, because they were too perceptive for an 8-year-old, and there was nobody to blame for that except genetics. "Is it about Mom?" Ethan looked at his son. He thought about managing this. He thought about the careful partial truth, the version designed to protect the answer that kept Noah insulated from the reality that his parents were about to go back into a room with lawyers over something that was ultimately beneath all the legal language about whether Ethan was allowed to be happy. "A little bit," he said. "Nothing for you to worry about. I'm handling it." Noah looked at him for a moment with that unsettling clarity. "Is it about Lily too?" Ethan went still. "Why would it be about Lily?" "Because Mom called me last night," Noah said simply. "She asked me if I'd met Lily. I said yes. She asked me if I liked her." He paused. "I said yes because I do. She makes good hot chocolate and she knew what an anglerfish was without me having to explain it." Ethan felt the specific cold that comes when you realize the geometry of a situation is worse than you thought. Jessica had called Noah, directly. She'd asked her 8-year-old son leading questions about his father's personal life, and Noah, being 8 and honest and having no reason to understand the machinery of what he was being asked to operate, had answered. "What else did she ask you?" Ethan kept his voice even. Calm. He was aware of himself performing calm, which was different from feeling it. "She asked if Lily was there a lot," Noah said. "I said not a lot, just sometimes. She asked if you and Lily hugged." He said it with the mild bewilderment of someone who did not understand why this was interesting information. "I said I didn't know. I don't think I've seen you hug. Have you?" "No," Ethan said, which was technically true and felt like an incomplete truth simultaneously. "She asked if you seemed happy," Noah said. Ethan looked at his son. "What did you tell her?" he asked, and his voice came out quieter than he meant it to. Noah shrugged with the elegant simplicity of childhood. "I said, yeah. You seem happier lately." He tilted his head. "Is that bad?" Ethan looked at his son for a long moment. His chest was doing something complicated. Anger at Jessica, gratitude at Noah, grief at the situation. And underneath all of it, that thing the boy had said so simply and without drama. "You seem happier lately. You seem happier." His 8-year-old had noticed what Ethan had been trying not to fully admit to himself. "Nobody," he said. "That's not bad. That's the best thing anyone has said to me in a while." Noah seemed satisfied with this. He slid off the chair. "I'm going to watch TV," he announced. "Can we have pancakes?" "We can have pancakes," Ethan said. He sat at the table alone for another minute after Noah disappeared into the living room, listening to the low sound of the television starting up, and he made a decision. Not about the custody case specifically, about something larger. About the pattern he was done repeating. The pattern of retreat, of managing, of making himself smaller so the conflict didn't escalate. He was done with the pattern. He had been done with it since the night he'd stood in Lily's doorway and said, "I'm not going anywhere," and meant it with every circuit in his body. He picked up his phone. He texted Lily. She called Noah, asked him questions about you. "I need you to know that before it becomes news." Lily's response came in 4 minutes. Not 40 seconds this time, 4 minutes, which told him she was sitting with it, which told him she understood the weight of it. Then, "How is he?" Ethan almost smiled. Of all the things she could have asked. First, she asked about Noah. Not about herself, not about what it meant for them, not about the legal implications. "How is the kid?" "He's fine," Ethan typed. He told her you knew what an anglerfish was. "I think he considers this your most important quality." A pause. Then, "He's not wrong." Then Ethan. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly." He typed, "Always. Do you need me to step back?" "Not permanently. Just while this is happening. While the custody thing is active. If my being in the picture makes this harder for you legally, I will step back. I will not like it. But I will do it." He read it twice. He thought about the letter in his jacket pocket, which he'd moved to his nightstand, because he wasn't ready to put it somewhere permanent yet, but needed it close. He thought about what she'd written. "I hope you know that someone was paying attention. Someone saw you." He thought about his son saying, "You seem happier lately," with the simple clarity of a child who had no agenda. He typed, "The answer is no. And I need you to stop offering to disappear because you think it's the right thing to do for other people. It's not the right thing, it's the old thing, and we're both done with the old things." He watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, appear again. Then, okay, 1 word. But he knew what it cost her to let it be just 1 word. He knew because he was learning her the way she'd defaulted to accommodation, the way she'd spent years shaping herself around what other people needed, the way every instinct she had was trained toward making herself smaller when things got complicated. She was learning not to. And he was the person she was learning it with. That felt like something that deserved to be honored. He made pancakes. The weekend passed in the specific suspended way weekends pass when something legal is pending. Not bad, exactly, just slightly unreal. He took Noah to a bookstore Saturday morning. Noah found a book about bioluminescent deep-sea creatures and held it up with the intensity of someone presenting evidence in a trial. "This has anglerfish," Noah said. "I see that." "Can I get it for Lily?" Ethan looked at his son. He thought about 100 different ways to respond to this, and the only honest one was, yeah, we can get it for Lily. Noah seemed deeply satisfied. He tucked the book under his arm and moved on to the next shelf, with the efficiency of someone who had accomplished his primary objective. Ethan stood in the middle of the bookstore for a moment, holding his coffee, watching his kid, and thought, this is what Jessica is trying to call harmful. This. A boy who found a book and thought about someone he liked enough to want to share it with her. This is the environment she filed a legal document to protect him from. He called Diane Sunday evening with all the documentation she'd asked for. His statement, 3 pages precise and unapologetic, describing his relationship with Lily as developing and serious and founded on honesty and mutual respect, and inviting the court to evaluate it on those terms. Character references from his supervisor, his neighbor Noah's soccer coach. Contact information for Noah's pediatrician and teacher, both of whom had been warned and were both in Diane's assessment. Excellent witnesses because they were boring in the best possible way. They would say the child was thriving and they would say it without drama. This is good, Diane said. This is very good. She's going to see this response and she's going to know she doesn't have a case. Will she drop it? A pause. She might escalate first. People like this. Diane stopped herself. In my experience, when someone files something like this, and the other party responds from a position of strength rather than defensiveness, there's sometimes a period where they double down before they back off. Be prepared for that. I'm prepared, Ethan said. And he was. For the first time in 3 years, he was prepared for a fight he hadn't started because he was finally certain enough of what he was fighting for to stop being afraid of what the fighting might cost. Monday morning, Diane filed the response. Monday afternoon, Ethan's phone rang. Not his attorney. Not Lily. A number he didn't recognize, which turned out to be Jessica's mother. His former mother-in-law, calling from a number she'd apparently gotten through someone Ethan couldn't identify, which meant she'd worked to reach him, which meant this was deliberate. He answered, "Ethan." Her voice was the particular blend of warmth and reproach that he'd spent 6 years navigating. "I wanted to talk to you before this goes further." "Okay," he said. "I want you to know that I did not agree with Jessica's decision to file," she said. "That's not. I want to be clear that this was not a family decision." Ethan felt something shift. "I appreciate that. I also want to say—" She paused, and the pause had weight. "I've known about Lily's feelings for a long time. Much longer than any of this. She told me once years ago, and I told her to be careful, and she was. She was always so careful." Another pause. "She's a good woman, Ethan. She's always been the quieter one, the one that nobody—" Her voice caught slightly. "Nobody paid enough attention to in this family, herself included." Ethan sat with this for a moment. "She paid attention to everyone else," he said quietly. "Yes," her mother said. "She did. For years." A breath. "I'm calling to say, and I won't say this to Jessica, and I won't say it in any room with lawyers, but I'm calling to say that if you care about Lily, and if she cares about you, then you have my blessing, for whatever that's worth, and I'm sorry my daughter is making this difficult." Ethan's throat did something he hadn't anticipated. He was not a man who cried easily or often, and he didn't cry now. But there was a moment, brief and real, where something in him nearly broke open, with the specific relief of being told by a parent figure that the thing he'd chosen was worth choosing. "Thank you," he said. "That means more than you know." "Take care of her," she said. And she hung up. He sat with the phone in his hand for a long moment. Then he texted Lily. "Your mother called me." The response this time was instant. "What?" And then, "What did she say?" He typed, "Call her tonight. She has something to tell you herself." He could feel across the city Lily staring at her phone with that expression she had when she was thinking faster than she wanted to show. He could feel the calculation and the vulnerability and the old practiced habit of bracing for disappointing news. Then she typed, "Is it good?" He smiled. Actually smiled at his phone alone in his kitchen, like a man who had forgotten how to do that and was relearning. "It's good," he sent back, "I promise." Wednesday came. Their Wednesday. He was at the coffee shop first this time too. That was becoming a thing, him arriving early, which was not characteristic of who he'd been for the last 3 years, but seemed to be characteristic of who he was becoming. She walked in, and she looked different than she had the previous Wednesday. Lighter was too simple a word. She looked like someone who had put something down and was still getting used to the way her hands felt without it. She sat down. She looked at him. "My mom cried," she said. "Good tears or bad tears?" "Good tears." She shook her head slightly. "She told me she always knew. She said she kept waiting for me to do something about it, and she kept almost saying something and she didn't, because she didn't want to interfere." Lily paused. "She said watching me be careful for 4 years was one of the hardest things she'd done." "Your family has a theme," Ethan said. "What theme?" "Watching each other carefully and not saying the thing." Lily looked at him for a moment. Then, "Yes, I suppose we do." She picked up her coffee, black, no sugar. He'd ordered it when he arrived. She held it. "How are things with Diane?" "Filed Monday. We wait." "Are you scared?" He thought about lying. Not dramatically, just the small, comfortable lie of, "No, I'm fine, it's handled." He thought about it and put it down. "About the custody thing, no," he said. "She doesn't have a case and she knows it. She filed it to scare me." He paused. "I'm more scared of something else." "What?" "That I've spent 3 years being the kind of man who didn't fight for things," he said slowly. "The kind of man who retreated when things got hard and called it being reasonable. And that even now, even when I know better, even when I'm trying, some version of that man is going to reassert himself at the worst possible moment." Lily looked at him steadily. "You know what I think? Tell me. I think the man you're describing was never the real you. I think he was what happened when the real you spent 6 years not being heard." She held his gaze. "The man I've been watching for the last 2 months is not that man. He shows up. He's honest. He stayed in my apartment when he could have left. He kept the letter." She paused. "He came back. Twice. When he didn't have to." He looked at her. "People come back to things that matter to them," she said simply. The coffee shop moved around them, indifferent and warm. A chair scraped nearby. Someone's phone played 3 notes of a ringtone. None of it touched them. "I want to meet Noah," she said. "Officially. Not the coffee shop thing, not by accident. Actually meet him." She said it the way she said hard things, directly, without softening it into a question she wasn't really asking. "When you're ready. When it makes sense." "It makes sense now," Ethan said. She looked at him. "You sure? He already bought you a book about anglerfish," he said. "I think the ship has sailed on the introduction." Something moved across her face, that unguarded smile again, the wide one, the one that arrived before she could contain it. He was collecting those. He was keeping track of every time he surprised one out of her. "He bought me a book," she said, "about bioluminescent deep-sea creatures. He carried it to the register himself and paid for it with his allowance." He paused. "Well, with $4 of his allowance and $6 of mine, but the initiative was his." Lily pressed her hand briefly to her mouth. Her eyes were bright. "He used his allowance," she said. "Don't make a big deal of it to him," Ethan said. "He will absolutely pretend he doesn't care about your reaction and then watch for it constantly." "He is you," she said. He felt that land in a very specific way. Not as criticism, as recognition. As someone who had watched him long enough to understand what was inherited and what was chosen, and to find both of them worth knowing. Thursday came with a call from Diane. "She's withdrawing the modification request," Diane said. "Her attorney called this morning. No conditions, no counterfiling, they're withdrawing." Ethan stood in the middle of his office and felt the specific deflation of a threat that had never been real but had taken up a great deal of air for a week. "Why?" he said. "My guess." She saw our response. She talked to her attorney, who told her what a judge would make of this filing versus our response, and she decided the cost wasn't worth it. A pause. "Also, between us, I've seen this before. Sometimes the filing is never really about custody. It's about sending a message. The message being that she still has power over your choices." Diane's voice was precise and uninflected. "Our response sent a counter-message. You don't." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "That's it," he said. "It's just over." "The legal part is over," she said. "The rest of it, that's yours to figure out." He thanked her and hung up. He stood at his desk for a moment. He thought about texting Lily immediately. He thought about calling. He thought about saving it for Wednesday. He picked up his phone and he called her because he was done with waiting for appropriate moments when the right moment was clearly right now. She answered on the second ring. "Hey." She withdrew, he said. Silence. "Lily, I heard you." Her voice was strange, tightly controlled, like she was holding something. She just withdrew. "Yes." A breath. "Just like that." "Just like that." A longer pause. When she spoke again, her voice was slightly different, slightly less controlled, the feeling underneath it showing through the edges. "I spent a week," she said. "I spent a week being angry at myself for being in your life at all. I kept thinking if I hadn't called him, if I had just hired different movers, if I had kept being careful. The way I'd been careful for 4 years, none of this would have happened. Noah would be fine. Ethan wouldn't have a legal problem. Nobody would be—" "Stop," he said. She stopped. "This was never about you doing something wrong," he said. "This was about Jessica being unwilling to accept that my life moved on. That's not your fault. That's not something you should have prevented by staying invisible." He paused. "You were invisible for 4 years. What did it get you?" Silence. "An empty box and a plant," she said quietly. "Exactly," he said. "We're done with invisible." He heard her exhale, long and slow, and full of everything she'd been holding since Monday. "Okay," she said. "We're done with invisible." "Saturday," he said. "Bring yourself. I'll have Noah. We'll keep it simple." "Simple how?" "Pancakes," he said. "Noah makes a case for them every weekend anyway. You may as well be there." She laughed, that real laugh, the unguarded one. It came through the phone and settled into the room around him. "I'll be there at 8, she said. "1 sugar, he said. "I know yours," she said, and hung up. He stood in his office for a moment, after phone still in his hand. Through the window, the city moved in its ordinary Friday afternoon way, indifferent to the specific small revolution that had just completed itself inside one man's chest. The revolution of a person deciding finally, and without reservation, to stop retreating from the things that mattered. Saturday morning arrived, the way the best mornings arrive, quiet and unhurried, with good light and the smell of coffee already in the air when Ethan came downstairs. Noah was already awake, which was unusual, and already dressed, which was extraordinary, and standing in the kitchen, looking at the front door with the specific focused attention of a child who was expecting something and had been expecting it since approximately 5 in the morning. "She's not here yet," Ethan said. "I know," Noah said. "I'm not waiting." "You're absolutely waiting." "I'm just standing here." Ethan started the pancakes without further comment. At exactly 8 o'clock, the knock came. Noah moved toward the door with a speed that he attempted to disguise as a casual walk and failed completely. He opened it, and Lily was standing there in her coat, with her hands in her pockets, and she looked at Noah with that steady, attentive warmth that Ethan recognized as just how she looked at people she meant to know. Noah held up the bioluminescent deep-sea creature book. "I got you this," he said, "because you knew what an anglerfish was." Lily took the book with both hands. She looked at it. She looked at Noah. Her face did that thing, the wide, uncontained smile, the one Ethan had been collecting, but bigger than he'd seen it before. Bigger and more open and more real. "This," she said to Noah in a voice that was steady, but only just, "is one of the best things anyone has ever given me." Noah stood slightly straighter. "I know," he said with magnificent 8-year-old confidence. Then he turned and walked back toward the kitchen. "Dad's making pancakes," he called over his shoulder. Lily stepped inside. She looked at Ethan across the hallway. He looked back at her. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. She took off her coat. She followed Noah to the kitchen. She sat at the counter across from where Noah had already reinstalled himself, and she opened the book to the first page, and she said to Noah, "Tell me everything you know about the viperfish. Start from the beginning." And Noah, who had never in his life needed to be told twice to share what he knew about deep-sea creatures, started talking. Ethan stood at the stove. He made pancakes. He listened to his son explain the mechanics of bioluminescence to a woman who was asking follow-up questions that suggested she was genuinely interested, and the apartment was warm and the coffee was ready, and outside the city went about its ordinary Saturday business. He flipped a pancake. He thought about a cardboard box in a hallway in the rain. About 4 words in a doorway that had landed without a sound and changed the direction of everything. About a letter in his nightstand that he now read sometimes before sleep, Not because it told him anything he didn't know, but because it reminded him of something he needed to keep remembering, that being seen quietly, faithfully, without agenda was not a small thing. It was in fact the only thing. From the counter, Noah said, "Lily, did you know that anglerfish females are way bigger than the males, and the males just kind of attach themselves to the female and live there forever?" Lily said, "I did know that. What do you think about it?" Noah considered this with great seriousness. "I think the male anglerfish figured something out," he said. Ethan at the stove smiled to himself. He thought, yeah, maybe he did. He put the first plate of pancakes on the counter. Lily moved the bioluminescent creatures book to make room. Noah immediately put his hands around the plate with the proprietary urgency of a child who considers pancakes a primary food group. And in the apartment on the quiet Portland Saturday, with the coffee hot and the book open and his son's voice filling the space that had been silent for too long, Ethan Carter stopped bracing for the thing that would take this away, and simply for the first time in 3 years, let himself have it. Not because anyone declared it. Not because Ethan sat down and said every Saturday from now on, or because Lily marked it in her calendar with intention. It became a thing, the way real things become things, gradually, naturally, without announcement. Until one day you realize it's been 6 weeks, and the absence of it would feel like a missing piece rather than just an empty morning. Noah stopped asking if Lily was coming on Saturdays. He started asking what time. That was the difference. That single shift in the question from "is she" to "when" was the moment Ethan understood that something had quietly, without drama, become permanent in the life of his household. His son had voted. He had voted with the complete and uncomplicated certainty of a child who does not yet know how to pretend something isn't true when it is. Lily brought things. Not big things, never grand gestures, never performances. A better brand of maple syrup because she'd read somewhere that it made a difference, and it turned out it did. A book about electrical engineering written for children that she'd found in a used bookstore and thought Noah might like. And Noah had opened it immediately and announced that he now wanted to be an electrical engineer, a fact he reported with such conviction that Ethan looked at Lily over his son's head, and she pressed her lips together, trying not to laugh. She brought coffee, once the good kind from a roaster on the east side, and she brought it already ground to the correct coarseness for his machine, which meant she had paid attention to his machine specifically, which meant she had been paying attention to details again, which he had stopped being surprised by and started being grateful for as a permanent condition of his life. She slotted into the rhythm of his mornings with a naturalness that should have taken longer. She knew not to talk to Noah until he'd been awake for 15 minutes. He was not a morning person, and he needed runway, a trait he'd inherited directly from Ethan. She knew Ethan read the news on his phone while the coffee brewed and did not interrupt that. She knew that the spatula with the blue handle was the one he used for pancakes, and the one with the black handle was for everything else, a distinction that was arbitrary and irrational, but existed and mattered to him, and she honored it without comment. These were small things. These were everything. November arrived, and with it the particular quality of cold that makes Portland feel like a different city. Closer, quieter, the air carrying that specific weight of wood smoke and wet leaves. Ethan's days found a shape he hadn't had since before his marriage started going wrong. Work in the mornings. Noah in the afternoons. Wednesday coffee. Saturday pancakes. Texts throughout the week that had no agenda except the honest one thinking of you. Saw this. Wanted you to know. He still hadn't kissed her. This was a fact both of them were aware of, and neither of them had addressed directly. The awareness of it lived in the room whenever they were together. Not as tension exactly, not as something unresolved, so much as something that was being allowed to find its own time. He'd held her hand in her apartment. He'd touched her face. He'd stood close enough in her kitchen to be aware of her breathing. And each time something in both of them had chosen to let the moment be what it was, rather than push it into the next thing. He thought about it on a Tuesday night in early November, lying in bed with the rain doing its work outside the letter from his nightstand on the pillow beside him. He thought about what she'd written, "Someone saw you." The quiet one. I saw him. and he was worth seeing. He thought about 4 words in a doorway, and how much road they'd covered since then, and how much road there still was, and how for the first time in years, the road ahead didn't feel like something to brace against, but something to move toward. His phone buzzed. Lily. Are you awake? Him, yes. Lily, I need to tell you something, not by text. Can I call? He sat up. He typed, call me. She called. Hey, she said. Her voice was different. Not distressed, but carrying something. He'd learned the specific qualities of her voice the way he'd learned everything else about her carefully and completely, and what he heard now was the voice she used when she was about to say something real that cost her something. Hey, he said. What's going on? Jessica called me today, she said. His jaw set. Okay. Not a fight, she said quickly. Not it wasn't what I expected. She was... A pause. She was quiet. She said she wanted to talk, and I said okay because I didn't know how to say no to her in that particular tone. Another pause. She said she's been thinking about the custody filing. She said she knows it was wrong. She didn't say sorry. I don't think she's there yet, but she said she knows it was wrong. Ethan was quiet. She said something else, Lily said. Her voice shifted slightly. She said, and I'm going to say this exactly because I've been sitting with it all afternoon, she said. I always knew you loved him more carefully than I did. I just couldn't say it while I was still his wife. The room was very still. Lily, he said. I know, she said. What did you say to her? I said... She stopped. I said I was sorry that the marriage hurt her. I said I never wanted to be the reason for her pain, and I never intended... Her voice caught very slightly, just the edges. She said I know you didn't. That's the part I couldn't forgive for a while. And then she asked me if I was happy, and I said... She stopped again. I said I was getting there. Ethan sat in the dark of his bedroom and held the phone and felt the weight of what she'd just given him. Not the information, the trust. The specific trust of a person who had spent 4 years keeping her own counsel, carrying things alone, solving her own emotional problems in private boxes with taped lids, and was now choosing deliberately to bring them to him first. Are you okay? He asked. I think so. A pause. It was a lot to hold today. You should have called me earlier, he said. I know, she said quietly. I'm still learning that. I know you are, he said. Call me earlier next time. A pause, then softly. Okay. Lily. Yeah. She wasn't wrong, he said carefully. What she said about you. You did love whatever you had for me more carefully than anything I experienced in 6 years of marriage. That's not a small thing. I want you to know I understand that. The silence that followed was the specific kind of silence that happens when something true has been said, and the person receiving it needs a moment to decide whether to let it in or deflect it. He could feel her on the other end of the phone that contained stillness, that practiced composure, and then the very small sound of it releasing. Just a breath, just the sound of letting something in, of, thank you, she said. Her voice was small and real and nothing like her usual careful precision. Thank you for saying that. Go to sleep, he said gently. Saturday's pancake day. Noah is already planning to tell you everything he knows about vampire squid. She laughed, small, tired, real. I'll be ready. You'll never be ready, he said. Nobody is ready for the vampire squid lecture. You just survive it. She laughed again, fuller this time. He stayed on the phone until her breathing changed, not to sleep, just to the quieter rhythm of someone who had set something down and could feel the difference in their own chest. Then he said goodnight, and she said goodnight, and the line closed. He lay in the dark for a long time after. He thought about Jessica saying, I always knew you loved him more carefully than I did. He thought about what it cost her to say that. Not much, maybe, or maybe everything. He didn't know Jessica well enough anymore to calculate it, but he understood that something in the architecture of this situation had shifted. A load-bearing wall had changed position. The structure was different now. He fell asleep with the letter on the pillow and his phone on the charger and the rain steady on the window, and for the first time since he could clearly remember, his last thought before sleep was not about anything he'd failed to do, or anything he was afraid of, or any version of himself that was inadequate. His last thought was simply Saturday. Saturday came. It was the second week of November, and Noah was in a vampire squid phase that had consumed approximately 40% of all dinner table conversation for the previous 9 days. Lily arrived at 8 with coffee from the East Side Roaster and a completely straight face when Noah opened the door and said, before hello, "Did you know vampire squid can turn themselves inside out?" "I did not know that," Lily said seriously. "Tell me more." Noah turned and walked back to the kitchen, already talking. Lily caught Ethan's eye over Noah's head. He shrugged with the expression of a man who had made peace with his son's fixations and found unexpected grace in them. She smiled, the small one, the first one of the day, the contained one. He'd get the real one later. He always did. They made pancakes. Noah narrated. Lily asked questions. Ethan stood at the stove and listened to his son's voice filling the kitchen and thought, this exact sound. This is the sound of a life that fits. After breakfast, Noah disappeared to his room to do whatever 8-year-olds do when they have been social for 2 hours and need to recharge. Ethan and Lily cleaned up. They moved around his kitchen with the ease of people who had done this enough times that the choreography was settled. She washed, he dried, she knew which cabinet the mugs went in. He knew she liked the window cracked even when it was cold because she ran warm. They were almost done when she said without looking up from the sink, "I've been thinking about something." "Tell me," he said. "I've been thinking about the fact that we've been doing this for 2 months," she said. "The Saturdays and the Wednesdays and the texts and the—" She paused. "All of it. And it's the most consistently good 2 months I can remember in a long time. And I keep waiting for myself to do the thing I always do." "What thing?" "The thing where I decide it's too good," she said. "The thing where I find the reason it's going to fall apart, and I start preparing for it instead of just being in it." She handed him the last mug. "I keep waiting to do that, and I haven't. And I don't know if that's because I've changed or because—" She finally looked at him. "Because something about this is different enough that my old habits don't fit anymore." He dried the mug. He put it in the right cabinet. He turned to face her. "Which do you think it is?" he asked. "Both," she said. "I think I've changed a little. And I think you're different from what I've had before in ways that matter." She held his gaze. "You don't make me feel like I have to earn the space I take up. I've spent my whole life feeling like I was taking up space that belonged to someone else. With you, I just—" She stopped. "I just feel like I fit. And that's unfamiliar enough that it scared me for a while." He looked at her for a long moment. He set the dish towel down on the counter. He crossed the kitchen, and he stopped in front of her clothes the way they'd been close in doorways and hallways, and her apartment, the proximity that had been waiting for its moment. And he put one hand along her jaw, the way he had in her apartment weeks ago, his thumb at her cheekbone. "Lily," he said. "Yeah," she said, barely sound. "I'm going to kiss you," he said. "And I need you to not overthink it." She almost smiled. "I make no promises." He kissed her. It was not dramatic. It was not the movie version of a first kiss. No score. No rain. No choreography. It was quiet and warm and real, the way everything between them had been quiet and warm and real from the beginning. It lasted exactly as long as it needed to last, and not 1 second more. And when it was done, he stayed close, and she stayed close, and neither of them moved for a moment. Then she said very quietly, "I've been waiting a really long time for that." "I know," he said. "Like, a really long time." 4 years and some months, he said. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Her eyes were bright. "You've been counting. You remembered how I take my coffee from 3 years ago. he said. "I can count 4 years." She laughed. The real one. The wide, unguarded, sudden one. It came out of her like something that had been stored under pressure and finally found its release, and it filled his kitchen with the specific sound of a person who is in this moment, without any of her guards up, simply happy. From down the hall, Noah's voice. "Are you guys kissing?" Lily clapped her hand over her mouth. Ethan called back, "Mind your business." "I'm just asking," Noah said, entirely untroubled. Lily was shaking with suppressed laughter, her hand still over her mouth, and Ethan was looking at her and thinking this. This specific woman laughing in my kitchen, caught by my 8-year-old unable to compose herself. This is what I was looking for. This is what I didn't have words for until I found it. December came in hard and fast, the way Portland Decembers do, and with it, the particular business of the holiday season that transforms the ordinary calendar into something more demanding. Ethan had Noah for Christmas this year. They alternated, and this was his year, which he was grateful for with the specific deep gratitude of a divorced father who understood that gratitude was the correct response and not something to take for granted. He asked Lily if she'd spend Christmas with them. He asked her 3 weeks out, not casually, not as an afterthought. He asked her on a Wednesday over coffee, looking directly at her, making clear that this was an invitation that mattered. She said yes before he finished the sentence. He told Noah that night. Noah's response was to ask if Lily could come to his school's winter concert, which was in 2 weeks, because there was a part in the third song where he had a speaking line, and he wanted everyone important to hear it. Everyone important. Ethan stood in his son's doorway with his hand on the frame and felt something move through him that he could not have named precisely. Not pride, not grief, not happiness exactly, but some compound of all three that belonged specifically to the experience of watching your child grow wise enough to know who matters. "I'll ask her," he said. He texted her immediately, "Noah wants you at his winter concert. He says you're everyone important." Her reply came in 1 minute, "I'll be there." "What do I wear?" Him anything. He'll be looking for you specifically. Her, "Tell him I'll be in the 3rd row and I will clap the loudest." Him, "He will hold you to that." Her good. The concert was a Tuesday evening. Lily arrived before the doors opened, which Ethan had not told her to do, which meant she'd calculated when the seats would fill and arrived accordingly. She found him near the entrance with his mother, who he'd warned, and who'd looked at him very carefully when he mentioned Lily's name, and then nodded once with the economy of a woman who reserves judgment. And then, when she renders it completely. His mother shook Lily's hand and held it for a moment. She said, "He talks about you." Just that. Just those 4 words delivered with the warmth of someone communicating something much larger in the smallest possible package. Lily said, "He talks about you too." And then, because she was Lily, and she paid attention, "He said you make the best coffee he's ever had outside of a shop. He said you grind it yourself." His mother looked at him. He looked at the middle distance. She looked back at Lily and smiled with the specific approval of a woman who has just confirmed her assessment. They sat in the 3rd row. The concert was 45 minutes of elementary school musicians doing their absolute best with material that ranged from competent to ambitious, and Ethan spent a significant portion of it watching. Not the stage, but Lily watching her watch, Noah watching her face move with attention and warmth, and the genuine investment of someone who was not performing interest, but actually had it. Noah's speaking line came in the 3rd song. He'd been practicing it for 2 weeks. He stepped to the microphone with the particular solemnity of an 8-year-old who understood the weight of the moment found Lily's face in the 3rd row, and spoke his line something about winter and quiet, and the way things grow beneath the snow with complete and total confidence. Lily clapped the loudest. Noah, returning to his spot, did not look at her with the expression of someone who didn't care. He looked at her with the expression of someone who had wanted this specific person in that specific seat and felt the rightness of it landing exactly as planned. After the concert, walking to the parking lot, Noah slipped his hand into Lily's without asking, without making a thing of it, with the matter-of-fact ease of a child who has decided someone belongs in his world and is simply acting accordingly. Lily's hand closed around his. Ethan, walking on Noah's other side, looked straight ahead and felt the thing in his chest that had been broken for 3 years reknit itself 1 more degree. His mother beside him said very quietly, "She's good." "I know," he said. "She's good for you," she said. "And she's good for him." "I know that too," he said. His mother nodded. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Christmas morning arrived, and with it, the organized chaos of a household that had an 8-year-old who had been awake since 5:30 and was demonstrating superhuman restraint by waiting until 6 before beginning his low-intensity campaign to get adults vertical. Lily arrived at 7. He'd given her a key 2 weeks before, matter-of-factly, the way he did things that were obviously correct, handing it to her in the kitchen on a Saturday morning without ceremony. And she'd taken it with both hands and held it for a moment, and said nothing, which said everything. She let herself in on Christmas morning. She had coffee from the good roaster. She had a gift for Noah, a book of course, because she and Noah had established a mutual language of books. But this one was specific, a field guide to deep-sea creatures hardcover, illustrated the kind of book a child keeps for decades. Noah opened it and went completely silent for 30 seconds, which was the most profound response Ethan had ever seen his son produce. Then he said, "This is the best present," with the absolute conviction of someone who meant it without qualification. Lily said, "I thought you might like it." "I love it," he said. And he went back to the beginning and started reading it immediately, which meant Christmas morning became for a period very quiet, which suited the adults perfectly. They sat in the kitchen with coffee while Noah communed with his field guide, and the morning moved around them at its own unhurried pace. Lily had her feet tucked up under her on the chair, a thing she'd started doing recently, a small claiming of comfort, a signal that she was done being a guest, and had crossed into something more settled. He noticed every time and never said anything, and hoped she could feel that he noticed. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "Where do you think we are?" She asked it without anxiety, not seeking reassurance, seeking truth, the way she asked everything. "I don't mean, what are we going to do next, or where is this going? I mean right now today, where do you think we are?" He looked at her across the kitchen. His son was down the hall reading about creatures that lived in the dark parts of the ocean. Outside Portland was doing its gray and quiet Christmas thing. The coffee was good. The key she'd used to let herself in this morning was on her keychain. "I think," he said slowly, "we're in the beginning of something that isn't going to have a dramatic ending because it was built too carefully to collapse." He paused. "I think we're in the part where the foundation is finished and we're starting to build the rest of it. And I think—" He looked at her directly. "I think this is the most honest thing I have ever been inside of, and I don't intend to waste it." She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were steady, clear. The eyes of someone who has been waiting for a specific thing for a long time and is watching it arrive and knows enough to recognize it. "Okay," she said. "Good." "Good," he agreed. Then Noah appeared in the doorway with the field guide open to a page about the barrel-eye fish. "Did you know its eyes rotate?" he said with the urgency of a person sharing critical intelligence. "They point up to look for prey, and then they rotate forward. Dad, did you know that?" "I did not know that," Ethan said. "Lily, did you know that?" "I knew the eyes rotated," Lily said seriously. "I did not know why until just now." Noah looked satisfied. He returned to the hallway. They heard him settle on the floor outside his room. He read better on the floor, always had, and the apartment went back to its quiet. Lily looked at Ethan. He looked at her. Something moved between them. Not words, not touch, just the particular current of two people who have earned their way to the same place by completely different roads and arrived at the same moment to find each other there. Spring came, the way spring always comes. Apologetically at first, then all at once. Ethan's apartment gained a plant on the windowsill. Not a replacement for Lily's plant, which was still on her windowsill, watered every Tuesday by habit. A companion plant, a small, ordinary, intentional thing. They didn't move in together, not yet. They talked about it once in the way they talked about important things plainly without performance, from the position of two people who had learned the cost of moving too fast and the equal cost of moving from fear rather than readiness. She said she'd know when she was ready. He said he'd know when she was ready. They both knew it was coming, the way you know a season is changing, not from any single sign, but from the accumulation of small ones until the weight tips. What they did was more gradual and more real. Her things appeared in his apartment the way significant things appear quietly without announcement. A mug she preferred, a book she was rereading, the good coffee in his cabinet, a toothbrush in his bathroom that nobody mentioned, and nobody needed to mention because it was obvious and welcome and true. His things appeared in her apartment the same way: a jacket over her chair, his phone charger beside her couch. A drawing Noah had made for her, a deep-sea fish, anatomically questionable, but emotionally precise, taped to her refrigerator in the spot of highest honor. Noah stopped asking what Lily was doing on Saturdays. He started asking what they were all doing on Saturdays. The shift was small. The shift was complete. One evening in April, Noah was doing homework at the kitchen table. Lily was across from him working on her laptop, the two of them occupying the same space in companionable parallel. Ethan was leaning against the counter watching them, not intruding, just watching the way you watch something you need to keep evidence of, so you can believe it later. Noah looked up from his homework. He looked at Lily. He looked at his dad. He looked back down. Then, without looking up, he said, "Are you and Lily going to get married?" The kitchen was quiet. Lily's fingers went still on the keyboard. Ethan said, "That's a big question for a Tuesday night." "I'm just asking," Noah said. "Why are you asking?" Noah looked up. He had that expression again, that clear, unnerving perception. "Because it seems like the next thing," he said simply. "Everything else has already happened." Ethan looked at Lily across the kitchen. She was looking back at him with an expression he couldn't fully read, which was unusual, which meant she was feeling something larger than her precision could contain. "It seems like the next thing," Ethan repeated. "It is, isn't it?" Noah said. Already back to his homework. Already done with the conversation, having delivered its essential content, and moved on with the efficiency of someone who considered the matter settled. Ethan kept looking at Lily. She kept looking at him. There was a long moment, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Then she looked down at her laptop. She was almost smiling. The small one first, the contained one, the first one of the day, and then slowly, the real one. The wide and unguarded and sudden one that he had been collecting since October, and would, he understood now with complete clarity, be collecting for the rest of his life. He smiled back. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to, because some things don't arrive with declarations. Some things don't need the grand gesture or the perfect moment or the dramatic music. Some things arrive the way Lily Hale had always arrived, quietly, deliberately, with patience and attention and complete conviction in what they carried. Love, when it is built correctly, does not announce itself. It simply becomes undeniable. It becomes the plant on the windowsill, and the key on the keychain, and the child's drawing on the refrigerator, and the correct coarseness of the coffee, and the second toothbrush that everyone pretends not to notice, until one day, all at once, it's just the truth of the life you're living. Ethan Carter had spent 3 years thinking he was invisible, standing in rooms where no one was watching, moving through a life that had all the right shapes and none of the right warmth. Wondering in the quiet of too many late nights whether the stillness in his chest was peace or resignation, and being unable to tell the difference. He knew the difference now. He had learned it from a woman who had seen him clearly from a doorway years before he saw himself, who had carried what she felt with more dignity and discipline than most people bring to anything, who had waited. Not because she was passive, but because she understood that the right thing at the wrong time is still the wrong thing, and who had, when the time finally came, said 4 words without drama and without apology, and let them land where they needed to land. The quiet man who had once thought his stillness made him invisible had finally, at 34 in a kitchen in Portland on an ordinary Tuesday in April, understood the truth that had been waiting for him all along. He was not invisible. He had simply been waiting for someone with the patience and the precision to look in the right place. Lily Hale had always known where to look, and in the end, that was the whole story, not the legal filings or the confrontations, or the box with the taped lid, or even the 4 words in the doorway. The whole story was simpler and truer and more ordinary than any of that. The whole story was this: a quiet man and a careful woman found each other in the space between what they'd given up and what they hadn't yet allowed themselves to want, and they chose slowly, honestly, without performance, to build something real. It wasn't loud, it was never going to be loud, but it was solid, it was warm, it was exactly the right shape, and it was at last completely theirs.